Your Darkanaxe stood his post at the Highland door, as he had for the last 6 forgings. As usual, he mostly stared across the Highland Bridge and chewed on dried mushroom stalks to keep from losing his mind to the boredom. The thunder of hammers on forges below echoed up, and Yor imagined his older brothers standing beside their father, assisting with House Darkanaxe's contribution to the great forging. He spat out a particularly brittle chunk of mushroom jerky and imagined it hitting his brother's face. It should be him down there, standing beside father. Gudrid's forging was mediocre at best, but no, as the eldest, he had first right to attend. Yor glanced back at the door, which remained closed. No visitors were expected today. He could descend the steps and at least witness the great forging. Yor sighed. No, his father would have him dipped in molten metal if he abandoned his post. Perhaps next year. The noise of the hammers stopped, and Yor grunted. At least it would be over soon, and his replacement would arrive. The thunder resumed, and Yor frowned. That wasn't right. He moved closer to the edge and strained to hear. No, it wasn't the hammers. This sound came from above. Yor looked up as the roof of the cavern cracked and molten lava gushed out. He screamed a warning, but his voice was lost in the heat and chaos that followed. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome back for another episode of my Tales of the Burned Stones miniseries. Last time, Xarfal Brightwind approached the mountain in search of an entrance to the tunnels beneath Mount Baram. It took some time, but he found his way to a partially obscured tunnel entrance. Once he cleared a path forward and entered the tunnel, he realized it was not the tunnel he hoped for, as there were no signs of foot traffic passing through here in the last few days. Continuing forward, he found a small cavern with a blocked passage on the far side. It appeared to be shaped rock that was intentionally rolled into place to block the passage, and though he attempted, he wasn't strong enough to open it by himself. Upon further inspection, he realized there was a walkway above him. He climbed up and was able to proceed. The next tunnel contained a strange resonant hum that began to affect him psychically. He struggled forward, sharpening his will until he emerged from the tunnel into another cavern. As he was shaking off the chaos in his mind, a giant cave spider attacked. It was a short fight, and Xarfal ended up bleeding profusely, pinned to the ground by a massive web. The spider left him for a later meal and went to feast on another figure cocooned in a web along the wall. Xarfal managed to cut himself out of the web, sneak up behind the spider, and finish it with a thrust from his rapier. He then addressed the figure in the cocoon, but the only response he received was a groaning rattle. So, as we start this new episode, let's take a quick moment to talk about Dreams of Glory. Dreams of Glory is a mechanic whereby you set an intention for your character for a session. And if you fulfill your intention for that session, you gain an advancement. So let's check that real quick before we dive into the narrative. So my dream of glory that I wrote down for Xarfal for the last session was to gain entrance to the tunnels beneath Mount Baram and pick up the Mage's Trail. I think that because we're doing just a short little mini series here and I want to give Xarfal the chance to advance, I'm going to say that yes, he is on the Mage's Trail. Xarfal doesn't know it yet, but I had thought already that the figure captured in this web is probably a mage. And so there is probably going to be some sort of clue that Xarfal is going to find, which will give him further guidance as to where he should go. So we're going to say that yes, this dream of glory has been fulfilled and he gains an advancement. So the way that advancements work is that they allow a character to grow stronger but may also trigger new narrative threads. When you get an advancement, roll on the following advancements table and note the result down on your character sheet. You only get to gain each advancement once, and so there is definitely a limit to how much your character can advance as far as abilities, weapons, skills, all that different stuff. When rolling a duplicate, you may choose any other result from the table. When the result of the advancement is narrative, you can use the oracles and tables found in this book to help you develop the idea. So the table is a D20 table, so I'm going to roll a D20 and see what we get. A 13. Gain 1 resilience. Well, I will take it. So my initial resilience was 6, now goes up to 7, and he's currently at 1 resilience because he got really beat up by that cave spider. So we should go ahead and write up a new Dream of Glory for Xarfal for this session. So that is going to be a follow-on for the previous Dream of Glory, and I'm going to call it Find Evidence of the Mages Passing and Follow Them. Let's jump into the narrative and get a sense of what's going on in the aftermath of this battle against the cave spider. There's silence in this small cavern as Xarfal Brightwind looks down upon the carcass of this large cave spider that almost captured him and feasted on his life's blood. His rapier is dripping with dark ichor, and Xarfal takes a moment to pull out a small cloth and wipe the rapier clean before replacing it in its sheath. And then he looks across at this cocoon on the wall. This figure is within it. And though he spoke to it, there was no response but a low groan. He steps forward and inspects this webbing, and he has no real experience with the age and the quality of spider webs. Only the webs that he's seen spiders spin in the forests of his home. And those were much, much smaller spiders, much smaller webs. And so as he looks at it and studies it, he is wondering how long this web has been here. And he's wondering how long this figure who is trapped inside of it has been here. And he wonders if that person yet lives. Was that groan a groan of life or a death rattle? So he removes his dagger and he begins to cut away at the webs. They're sticky and they cling to his hand and to the blade as he carves through them. But with enough force, with enough patience, he is able to cut this figure away from the wall and lowers it to the ground. Xarfal slowly begins cutting away the webbing from around the figure. And as he does, he sees scraps of cloth that looked to have been once finely made. He carefully cuts his way through the webbing until he sees a frail, skinny body belonging to an old man. The body is covered in small welts and looks emaciated and pale. And Xarfal leans down, brings his ear close to the man's mouth, and listens for breath. Is this man still alive, or did he expire in this final feeding of the cave spider? Well, let's ask the question, is this man alive? I think it is very unlikely, so we're going to roll a d4 and see what we get. A 1, appropriately no and. Xarfal holds his ear close to the man's mouth, listening for breath, for life, for any sign that this person is still alive. At first, the silence in this room is almost cacophonous. The sound of his own heart thundering in his chest drowns out all other sounds. And then Xarfal hears a strange squelching sound. A gross twisting of flesh. In a heartbeat, he recoils, and he looks down at the body and says,
"This does not seem fitting. For one such as you, my old friend. This creature has befouled your body. If I leave you here as you are, it will mean a corruption of your flesh. So if you will forgive me, I think there is only one thing for me to do."
And quickly, Xarfal is going to reach down and attempt to search through whatever pockets he may find on this figure. So he's going to roll a skill here, and it could be willpower for the sense of like his perceptive abilities, but I'm actually going to roll my dexterity because I think this is really about how quick and nimble he can be searching through the pockets of this dead man before whatever that squelching sound comes to fruition. So we're going to roll a d6. That is what his dexterity currently is at, and let's see what we get. Ooh, not good. A 1. So you fail or succeed with a major complication. I'm going to say that it is a failure. So he searches through the pockets and he goes as quickly as he can, but he can see the stomach distending and there's twisting of flesh and almost as if there's something skittering beneath the man's skin. And Xarfal is hurrying as quickly as he can, but there seems to be very little wrapped around this man. Whatever clothing he was wearing before seems to have been maybe eaten away by exposure to these webs. And he finds a few small scraps of paper, but they're slimy and slick with whatever substance is secreted by these webs. As he pulls his hands out from inside this cocoon, he wipes his hands off and shakes his head. Then he stands and he rummages around in his pack and pulls out a small bit of flint and tinder. And he strikes it. He gets a flame and then he tests it on the webbing. And the webbing seems to burn easily. And so Xarfal then drags the body over to the body of the spider and jams the body up underneath the spider, drags whatever webbing he can over and surrounds this creature, and then he lights it on fire and leaves the room behind. He is a few paces into the next tunnel when he starts to hear sickly popping and what could be small screeches, and the smell of burnt flesh wafts down the tunnel. And Xarfal Brightwind covers his nose and mouth as he continues on his way through the tunnels, gagging at the sickly aroma that's filling the area. He walks for another dozen or so paces and finds a small alcove. He checks it over to make sure there aren't any hidden recesses that he's unaware of. And then he tucks himself into that alcove and settles down to take a rest. So, Xarfal Brightwind very much did not find any information from that body. So he is continuing forward in the blind. But currently we are sitting at all of our skills are down to a D4. Our rapier's down to a D4. We've used grit. Xarfal is going to go ahead and take a rest, and that lets us reset skills, lasting items, loot die, and resilience to initial values. Also clears grit, removes all minor hindrances. Can only be done if you are in a secure spot and have time in front of you. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll on the Risk Oracle. And if the Risk Oracle comes back that the situation is not risky, then I think he gets a full rest. If it comes back that the situation is somewhat risky, then maybe he has to make a check in order to stay hidden while something passes by. And if it comes back as a perilous check, then he is not going to get a rest and things will be much worse for him. So let's go ahead and roll on our Risk Oracle here. I think he is in a precarious situation here because he is in a tunnel between two caverns. He burned the body of this spider and the body of one of its victims behind him, but that might draw other creatures out. So I'm going to roll our d6. We'll see what our risk is. A 6 on the die. The situation is not risky. You simply do it. So he settles in and listens for a little while. There doesn't seem to be any sounds of movement coming down the tunnel. And so he closes his eyes and tries to rest and get some sleep because he's been walking since early mornings and he's spent several hours now in this cavern trying to make his way through. He's exhausted, he's injured, he's shaken from his experiences thus far. So he's going to take a little bit of time to bind his wounds, and then he's going to fall asleep for a brief time. So we can reset our strength die back to a d6, dexterity back to a d8, the willpower stays at a d4, our rapier goes back to a d6, we get the grit back, and our resilience goes back up to 7, which is wonderful. So hours pass, and I think he sleeps fitfully. There are a few times where he wakes to the sound of skittering, and he holds his breath for a moment, listening to see if there is another spider in this tunnel that's coming closer. But whatever skittering he heard, or maybe even thought that he heard, doesn't resolve into any sort of danger. And so he slips back into unconsciousness. The hours pass, and finally Xarfal wakes and stretches and peeks out from inside his little alcove that he found. The tunnel's dark, and his eyes have grown accustomed to the darkness, and he's able to see the shapes and outlines of the walls and the ceiling, the craggy stone of this tunnel. And so he lights another torch and heads back towards the tunnel with the spider. In his waking, he realized that he hurried out of that tunnel quickly and didn't really spend any time searching for anything else in the room. There was nothing on the body in that cocoon, but maybe there was something else. Discarded clothing, discarded gear, anything that might help him on his journey forward. So he makes his way back into that room, and the body of the spider and the body of that man are still smoldering. Xarfal looks at it and says,
I hope you find what peace you may, in whatever afterlife you believe in. For I will find no peace until I find those mages and discover what wickedness they brought upon this world. For now, I must seek out what other wonders there might be, whatever terrors, gods that may be listening. Guide my eyes, guide my hands. Take me to what I need to find.
I'm going to roll our loot die. This lets you loot locations for items. You start with a D12 loot die, which steps down after each usage. To loot a place, roll your loot die and interpret the results. Got a 5. You get a D6 depletable item. Well, I don't know what this D6 depletable item can be, so why don't we roll on our sparks to see if that sparks any inspiration. 2d6, the theme is 4 and 1, revenge. So this is an item of revenge. Xarfal spends some time searching through this room, and he does find a small satchel that looks like it could have belonged to the figure that he found in that cocoon, or maybe it has been here for longer. But he rifles through it, and there are a number of mundane items in there. Quill, an ink pot, parchment, all of these things. And he's just rifling through them and says,
"This does nothing for me."
And then there's a slight clink, clink, clink of 2 vials knocking together. And he pulls them out, and in the firelight, he holds them up and looks at them. And there is what appears to be a swirling inferno captured within these vials. He holds them up to the light and he says,
This could have been useful before, but perhaps they can be useful as I go forward. Yes, I will carry these with caution.
And he's going to pocket the 2 Inferno vials. So, Xarfal, having satisfied himself that he has discovered what is useful in this room, turns his eyes back towards the tunnel and begins making his way forward. He continues on for another half an hour to an hour as this tunnel continues to travel deeper and deeper beneath Mount Baram. He is walking ever with caution, and it's time for us to roll again on the Risk Oracle to determine if there is any obstacle or challenge between him and the next chamber. So he was in a precarious position. I think the deeper he gets into this mountain, the more chaotic it becomes. So we're going to roll a d4 and see what our risk is. A 4. So the situation is risky. Make a check. And let's roll another spark to see what the nature of this obstacle might be. 2 and 6. Tradition. Xarfal continues deeper and deeper into the tunnels beneath Mount Baram until he comes to a door. And this is a door similar to the shaped stone that he saw before. But this time it's more intricately carved. And there's a recess in the middle of the door. Above that is written in the Dwarven language a series of words. Now, Xarfal is an exiled noble, so I think it's likely that he would at least know something about Dwarven language, Dwarven culture. So let's roll on the question oracle. I think it's very likely, so that's a D10. I have a piece of information that is the base level knowledge that basically everyone has. If he rolls well enough, if he gets a yes answer on here, then he'll know more than that. So we'll roll the D10. A 3, which is yes, but. The answer here is that yes, he can read some Dwarvish, but he's not fluent in it. And so the base piece of knowledge that he knows is that in Dwarven culture, it is traditional for guests visiting the Dwarven kingdom to present a gift to gain entrance to the halls beneath Mount Baram. What he doesn't know is exactly what this phrase above the door says. He gets the gist of it, which is basically give your gift and let it be weighed and measured. maybe this is where our role comes in. Knowing what he knows about Dwarven culture, knowing what he knows of the language, and knowing what he knows about this situation that he's in and this door that he's looking at, can he glean what he needs to do to move forward? So we're going to roll our willpower, because I think this is very much a thought process that he has to go through. So unfortunately, Xarfal, though his name is bright, his brain is not. So we roll a d4 and hope for the best. I got a 4, so you succeed, but there is a minor complication. That is the best we can hope for. Xarfal studies this door, and it's this beautiful, intricately carved dwarven door. And it depicts these images of visitors coming to the mountain, carrying gifts. And some of these figures are carrying large gifts. Some are carrying very small gifts. And Xarfal studies them, and he says to himself,
I remember a story my father once told me of a time when he visited the kingdom beneath Mount Baram. It is said that those who pass through these doors must give a gift of themselves, and a gift that is properly weighed. For the dwarves do not accept gifts that are too light or too heavy. And the weight of the gift must depend on the person themselves. There is crafty dwarven magic woven into these stones, and they determine what is worth to each person. So, I must give a gift, but if the gift is too grand, the dwarves may think I am trying to gain something on them. If it is too little, they will think I am not taking it seriously. I must give something of meaning, something of value, but something that is not too valuable. I wish that I had not died but a few days ago and been bereaved of my memory. Why did I come here?
He takes a moment to take stock of what he carries with him. He has a very simple traveling pack with basic survival essentials. He has his plain clothing. He has his finely crafted rapier. He has armor and a short bow, and now these 2 inferno vials. He's looking over all of those things, and he says to himself,
No, these are not right. It is something that must have meaning. Those words on the door, they say, it must be weighed and measured. Weighed implies heft, something of solidity. But measured seems to indicate that it must take stock of what the gift means.
And then Xarfal looks to his wrists, and he sees the copper bangles that he wears. And he says,
Yes, I think I might have it. But to part with these is to part with a love that I do not wish to release. I have but 2 choices. I can offer my gift and hope it is sufficient and that the doors let me pass, or I can turn back and return to the outside. Perhaps I will find another way forward, but who is to say that I will not be faced with another door and another choice such as this? No, I've come so far. I must continue.
And so, with a heavy heart and some hesitation, he slowly removes these copper bangles from his wrists. He brings them up to his mouth for a moment, he kisses them, and he says,
I remember you, my love, and all the times we shared. I am sorry that you could not come with me on this journey, though I confess I am glad that you were not there at the end. For who is to say that you would have been risen with me? Though I part with these gifts that you gave me, I shall ever carry you and your memory in my heart. But for now I must go forward.
And so Xarfal Brightwind places the bangles onto the pedestal in the center of this recess, at the heart of this door. And as he sets these copper bangles down and removes his hands, there's a grinding sound as the bangles are raised up on this stone platform and they disappear into the door. The grinding sound stops for a moment, and there's silence in this tunnel as Xarfal Brightwind wonders if he made the right decision, if he presented the right gift. And then a new grinding starts as this stone door begins to descend into the earth beneath. The tunnelway is opened, and Xarfal is able to step through from this cavern that was shaped out of stone and earth into a proper dwarven hall. But let us not forget that we succeeded with a minor complication. And I think that minor complication is that he steps into the dwarven hall, and I think he is expecting to find dwarves present. But what he finds instead is something entirely different. He is on a walkway that leads out into a vast open cavern, and there is beautiful dwarven stonework all around him. He steps forward onto that platform and begins looking around as though expecting perhaps that there is a guard or some representative of the dwarven kingdom waiting for him. But as he steps forward, he hears a cacophony. He sees, now that he's entered this open cavern, that the ceiling above is pouring out molten magma down deep into the center of this cavern. And Xarfal walks to the edge of this platform and looks down into the vastness of this chasm. And it is at that moment that he realizes that this waterfall of lava is not supposed to be there. Because he looks down and he sees the outer edges of this beautifully carved dwarven hall. But the center of it is full of magma and burning ash as that magma and lava flows out from the center. And he can see what look like tiny spots of ash, and the heat in this room is enormous. He looks across the chasm, and he is standing again on this platform, and there is a bridge that reaches across to the other side. But he's going to have to walk past that falling, burning magma to get there. And here now in this moment, as he's looking down, he looks back towards the entryway that he walked through, and he says to himself,
I wondered why there were no guards. Now I fear, are there any dwarves left down here? What horror has befalled Mount Baram? What terrible fate has met the dwarven kingdom? What horrors and terrors will I see when I descend down there? I do not wish to see the downfall of another civilization. and yet it seems as though it's my fate to continue forward and see what I must find.
And so Xarfal Brightwind steels himself, and he begins to cross that bridge. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Tabletop Audio for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word, and if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, I'm at Errant Solopod on Twitter and Instagram, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.